December 25, 1991. I got up around 5 a.m. last night, around 2 hours before Ashton, so I could wrap her present before she woke up. I was surprised to find that at some point before me, she had gone downstairs to place my presents under the tree. She got me 4 things total, all wrapped in different paper. That little shit. Grim hung out with me while I did my best to wrap her presents. I made coffee for the 2 of us after I was done. I walked over to the glass patio door and spent a few moments staring into the tree line. It was still dark, it was very quiet, the type of silence that is calming. The ambient light showed the silhouettes of a few elk by the lone 50-foot pine tree in the center of the backyard. I eventually made my way upstairs to wake Ashton. I held her in bed for a few minutes before she got up to get dressed. We drank our coffee and opened our presents by the fireplace. Ashton got up and ran to the coat closet in the other room. She came back in wearing nothing but a Christmas hat. We made love 3 times that morning before we curled up on the couch. She put on romantic Christmas movies while we soaked in the morning. Around 11 a.m. Ashton made us apple cider. I cooked us a huge lunch. Not one word was spoken about last night or the nights before. We were in complete bliss. Ashton wore a Christmas hat the majority of the day. Today was the first day all winter that the sun was visible, but around noon, the clouds crept back in to encompass Northridge with very dense, dark thick fog. The Christmas lights on our neighbors' houses were barely visible from our living room. We had some time to kill before going over to Ed's house, so we decided to put a record on the player and pour ourselves some wine. We cleaned the house and organized the gear in our backpacks. The chance of going back to Willow Creek before the new year was pretty low, but I figured to be prepared if so. Ashton bundled the ropes while I replaced the batteries in our flashlights and spirit box. I reached in my backpack to find Mr. Bringston's journal and the photo of Jacob with his family outside of Willow Creek. I couldn't help but to feel angry when looking at that photo. I'm not only angry at the trauma Mr. Bringston put his wife and Jacob through, but I think I am angry because of how many questions are still unanswered about the children of Willow Creek. The more I try to find answers, the further down the hole I go and the more frustrated I become. I just wish there was something I could do. Maybe that's why I'm so drawn to Willow Creek, for the children. Maybe to find answers for Jacob and the thousands of other children that endured such horror. If I do go back to Willow Creek before the new year, it would be for Jacob, not for personal gain, but for Jacob, you know. Maybe that's what he wants. Maybe that's what the first great king wants. Maybe it must be what the first great king wants. It is what he wants. Ashton is in the shower right now. Before we leave, I'm going to go back and edit what I wrote from last night before Ashton's reads it. I don't think I will be writing again until we get back from our adventures tonight or tomorrow. Ashton and I packed a second duffel bag full of supplies and thicker coats in case we are outdoors. The thermometer is reading -12 degrees at the moment. The snow has piled up at least a foot. The wind speed is at least at 40 miles per hour and the sun has been completely blocked by the dark thick clouds. There might be a blizzard tonight. If not tonight, then sometime soon. I figured I might get snowed in at whatever house Ashton and I end up at. My grandparents might come home early, so I decided to write a note about where we were going and that I love them very much. I told them that if they get home before us, then we had been snowed in somewhere on the mountain and we will be back soon. At the bottom I wrote, "If I am not home by New Year, call the sheriff." I figured it is better to cover our ass now in case we run into a worst-case scenario. Once Ashton got out of the shower, she signed the bottom with a heart with a little message saying, "I love the 2 of you. The best present I got this year was meeting your grandson and having the pleasure to stay with such gracious souls like your own. Merry Christmas. See you soon. Love, Ashton."
Yeah, class, it'll go pretty hard.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Me too.
Gosh, I can't wait to go home and take a bath. It'd be nice.
Just have a few weeks left.
Yeah, I just get home and I should be worried that I'm not gonna get cast. Oh wait, what do you call it? Name practice.
Just cut class.
I call class. That makes sense. Yeah, wait a minute.
39715.
Hey, I'm back. I made it back to the house. There are quite a few people downstairs, but I want to finish this chapter before going back down. The keys on the computer are getting stuck, but I am going to try my best to finish this. I am going to shut the door for now. A little bit of silence would be nice. Hold on. From what I can remember, Ashton and I were sitting in this room. We cleaned the rest of the house top to bottom. I took out a large cooking pot and filled it full of food for Grim. Ashton and I piled our things behind the bench seat in the truck before opening up the garage door. I shoved the driveway all the way to the street where the plow had cleared a path big enough for one car at a time. We pulled out from the house and slowly maneuvered through the snow and over to Ed's house. Once we got inside, we realized that Ed seemed a little off. Jake and Kendall were not going to be over for another few hours. Ed had been alone all morning. He had an obvious expression of worry on his face. When he spoke, his words were shaky. I don't know how to explain it, Forrest, but something is not right. I woke up to a soft voice next to my ear last night. I swear it was hers. It took a few minutes, but once I got up, I walked over to my window. Through the fog, I saw a dim yellow glow floating down the street, like a lantern. I could see it from my window. I went back to bed, and when I woke up there was a message on my computer screen. Ed said, taking a shot of brandy. I understand, man. Take a breath and chill out real quick, I said, pouring Ed another shot. After he threw it back, a few moments went by before he began to cry. It was obvious he was in pain. After a few moments, he stood up, walked over to the cupboard. He put the plate in the microwave before taking the blow out his pocket. 6 lines lay on the plate as Ed wipes his eyes and nose with a napkin. He threw the napkin on the ground, then placed his head in his hands. This isn't right, man. Something is really off. I can't. Phoo. No, no. He mumbled as he began to cry again. Ashton got up from her chair and walked over to embrace Ed. The moment she held him, he began to cry harder. Let it out, man. There is no shame, I said as I walked over to the front of the house. I locked the door so Jake and Kendall wouldn't walk in like they do. I feel so goddamn guilty. I should have told her, Forrest. She wouldn't have gone this time if she knew, Forrest. We were at the hut. I had Blanca's book. She should have known, man. Fuck. Fuck this, man. Ed clenched his fists tightly and shut his eyes as hard as he could. Whatever this was, seemed bottled up. Ed doesn't cry. Ed is one of the strongest guys I know. It takes a lot for him to break. Listen, you don't have to tell us anything, but we are here, okay? We will be right here, Ashton said, rubbing Ed's back as he continued to sob. I'm probably thinking too much about it. There are so many reasons these things could have happened, but my brain is making it the worst case scenario. That scenario shakes my core. I'm sorry for crying like a bitch, Ed said after pulling off of Ashton. He then grabbed the plate and railed 2 lines back to back. That sounds like anxiety, man. Shit is scary sometimes. You're good, brother, I said before getting up to hug him. I cry all the fucking time, dude. Don't stress it, you're only human. I stated after pulling off. Pour yourself a drink, dude, you don't have to tell us what's going on. It would be selfish for me to ask you to, but like Ashton said, we are here, I said as Ashton snorted her line. Some time passed before the silence was broken. There is no other explanation, man, it had to be her, Ed said aloud, picking his head up from his hands. What did the message on the computer say? Ashton asked once Ed wiped his tears. There were letters and words all over the place, as if someone dragged their finger across the keyboard to get to the right letter. I sat at the desk and tried putting it all together. It said something like, I am so sorry, my love. I followed the dim glow. I will see you soon, Mr. Ed. I love you, he said before looking down and crying again. I looked over at Ashton, who sat completely still. Chills traveled up my spine, the air grew cold. We both immediately understood what that meant for Ed and even more so what that meant for Taylor. We will have to stop by Camp Verdict at some point in the night to check on her, okay? For now, let's not think the worst, man. It could have been a hacker, it could have been a spirit trying to fuck with you. It could be a number of things, but until we check on her, try not to worry too much about it, okay? I said before handing him a pipe full of weed and a shot glass full of whiskey. Thanks for understanding, it's just my brain. I have not gotten much sleep in the past few days. I've been reading all the literature Blanca recommended. I'm sure I just need a good night of sleep. My brain is just tired, he said, taking another shot. Around 1:45 p.m. or so, Jake and Kendall showed up. Guess what the fuck I bought from the cashier at the liquor store? Jake said, walking into the living room. How did you get in? Ed asked, puzzled. I picked the lock, my good sir, Jake responded while taking a bow. What did you buy, dipshit? I said, looking over my shoulder from the couch. Merry fucking Christmas, bitches, he yelled, throwing a bag of pot and more coke on the coffee table. Fuck yes, Ed said as he got stood up from the couch. He left the room and came back shortly after with a glass bong. It's my dad's, so we can't fucking break it, he said, filling the glass with water from the sink while Jake put on Scooby-Doo. After about 4 episodes of Scooby-Doo, we realized we were all pretty fucking stoned. We began talking about dimensions, aliens, spirits, the Wendigo, the possibility of Bigfoot fucking other Sasquatches. Ed stood up and walked out of the room. When he came back, he was holding a large box radio. He plugged it in and turned the station to The Jerry Show. We listened to him rant about the hacks of Christmas and how Santa is a pedophile. After playing a few songs, the audio cut back to him talking. He began, we regret to inform you that yet another young female has been reported missing near the Forest of North Oak. 5 people had been reported missing last night. That brings the number to around 13 total this week in the county of Northridge. If you ask me, something strange is going on. After a few minutes of ranting, Jerry began to read off the names of the men and women that had been reported missing. Lily Howarth, James Timland, Thomas Sultan, Allison Rolkin, Olivia Benet, Nathan Jefferson, Kylie Braxton, Jonathan Grady, Elliot Evans and Franklin Wadsworth. At the end, he added that 4 of the missing have yet to be correctly identified, so they could not provide the names. The group passed around the bong again after pouring our drinks. Kendall was going through a stack of photos on the table that Ed developed from our investigations years ago. The conversation then drifted into conspiracy theories about the institution. The excitement was returning in Ed's complexion. He began telling us about all the things he has read over the past few days. We were very interested in Land of the Null, so he printed out pages from some forum. Land of the Null, to our knowledge, is a place where the below brings souls they think do not belong in the inferno. It is also the land of everything unholy. He explained that from December 25th until the new year, the ones that reside in the below, as well as Land of the Null, celebrate everything unholy while receiving offerings provided by their living followers, whether that be cattle, wealth or living beings. All winter, the living unapologetically prove their devotion to the ones they worship. By the new year, if the followers of the below are deemed deserving, they will be gifted crops, healthy cattle, and new opportunities for life with the promise of fertile women within the village. Jake thinks that the women in the cafeteria at Willow Creek, as well as the ones who hung the elk in the tree, were followers of sun worship and are descendants of the villagers that came after the Kilpoco. We all came up with the thought that the women we saw in the cafeteria at the institution on the 21st were performing the first step of a ritual directed towards sun worship. It made us think about December 21, 1973, when the children of the institution murdered the bishop. Blanca said that the children circled around the bishop's remains the same way the women did with the animals in the cafeteria. I never put those two things together, but it sparked even more curiosity. It was on all of our minds, but finally, Kendall brought up the idea of going back to Willow Creek. "Weren't you the one that didn't want us to go?" Ed said, taking another bong rip. "Yeah, but I feel different today," Kendall said after a sip of wine. "Blanca told us to stay away," I said as I railed another line. "Yes, but are we going to let one semi-insane woman stand in the way of the best research we've gotten to date?" Jake replied. "There are reasons she doesn't want us going back," Ashton said, pouring another glass. I began to feel the pressure in between my fingers once again. Ashton's hands were full. After some silence, I began. "Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some unexplainable things have been going on at all of our houses. I'm sure if you think hard enough about it, you can trace all of those unexplainable things back to the first time we went to Willow Creek. Now, with that being said, I know we all probably feel like we need some answers. I know I do. So I am okay with going back to Willow Creek today to maybe bring some of our questions to a conclusion. But like I said, this will have to be the last time we go back there for a long time, okay? Blanca specifically told us all not to go back to Willow Creek, not only together but individually. Now we will have to think of it later, but we better have a good fucking reason to tell her when we see her again." "Yeah, you're right, we did all promise her not to go back," Jake replied. "Yes, but hear me out. Every time Blanca told us not to go back, did you notice she would smile a little cryptically before taking a sip of wine? I noticed this the very first time we visited her home. I also noticed that when we went against her wishes and told her we went back on the 21st, she smirked like she was satisfied that we defied her wishes, but she played it off like she was disappointed. The more she told us not to go in, the more we felt inclined to go. Why would she warn us about the institution then give us books to provoke curiosity? Why would she be on the edge of her seat, intrigued with what we experienced if she was truly disappointed in us? Do not enter is like an invitation to us, and I think she knew this. I think she knew every time that we were going to go back, no matter what she said," Ed explained. "You're right, there are things she knows that she is reluctant to admit. I think there is a little more to Willow Creek and the below that she is not telling us," Ashton stated. "Fine, well go, but like we said before, this is the last time, at least until spring, okay?" Kendall stated before taking a shot. "It's 2:45 p.m. right now, when do you want to get going?" Ed said, looking high as fuck. "Now. Let's go now. It's dark as fuck outside and the clouds are only getting lower. The wind is stronger and the snow is only getting heavier. The sooner we get up there the better, that way we do not get the worst of it going up the mountain," I said as I stood up from the couch. One by one we finished our drinks and began packing for the night ahead of us. We made sure we had extra batteries and working equipment. We brought more tools and candles this time. Ed brought about 10 rolls of film for his Minolta. We filled our flasks and grabbed a few bottles of wine and put them in a separate bag. We shoveled the driveway and shut the garage door before we got back in the Jeep. My hands were freezing, even though the gloves. We stopped at the gas station and filled up Jake's tank. We all went inside to grab some snacks for the road. The cashier warned us that tonight there might be a blizzard and to stay warm wherever we wind up. I let the group all go back to the Jeep while I stayed behind to grab a few more waters from the cooler. It was just the cashier and I in the store when I went to check out. He grabbed the first water from me and scanned it. He looked at me in my eye and after a long pause, his lips began to move. The voice did not belong to him. "You should not be going there, Forrest." The voice was deep, slow, and a bit raspy. I was puzzled to see that his mouth continued moving but words could not be heard. Just like the boy on the road before he jumped. "Sir, I am not sure where this is all coming from," I responded. His mouth continued to move while he scanned my items. Occasionally he would look up at me and smile. The store remained silent other than the radio that played faintly behind the counter. Before I left, he waved goodbye to me and winked his left eye. It did not feel right, nothing about that felt right. I figured to keep that interaction to myself until later in the night. It never sat right with me. We pulled out of the gas station and slowly approached the stop sign before Jericho. We saw large headlights from a distance down the road. It looked like it could be a snowplow, so we decided to wait at the stop sign until it passed us. While we were idling, Ashton noticed the silhouette of a large bird flying through the trees. The bird made its way through the fog and landed on a pine branch that was across from us. It looked like a very large owl, a white owl with bright eyes. I had never seen one so big in my life. It was at least twice if not 3 times the size of a regular owl. It continued to look at the Jeep from across the road until the snowplow passed us. We pulled behind it and continued up Jericho. We realized that once we turned to go up the mountain, the owl began to follow us. I would periodically turn around in my seat and see the white owl flying across the road. Maybe I was still high, but tonight didn't feel right. I'm sure Ashton was on the same page. They still didn't know the conversation we had with Blanca, they didn't know about the house, and the shack with the journal. You know that feeling when you're at a party and you get fucked up quicker than everyone else, or the feeling you get when that certain someone shows up in a public place when you were having a good time. That's how Ashton and I felt. It didn't feel right going against Blanca, and it felt like she was here giving me those disappointed eyes. It was pretty quiet. The sound of Jake's chains along with the faint sound of a mixtape was the only things that could be heard. The fog grew thicker as the headlights struggled to illuminate the road. Occasionally the fog was light enough to see the trunks of the trees. As we rounded the last corner before our exit, we passed around the plate with lines of blow. It took a while for my anxiety to fade. After 2 cigarettes and 4 swigs of gin, I was beginning to feel better. After 20 or so minutes on the lone road, we approached the spot where we found the elk. Not one word was spoken when we drove down that road. We approached the gate that leads onto the property. There was a new lock. It looked the same as the last one. After we cut it off, we got back in and drove into the main parking lot next to a fence. The energy in the Jeep was pretty high. Jake, Ed, and I started talking in Scooby-Doo voices again. "We ready, Shaggy?" Jake said in Fred's voice as he turned around in his seat. "Like Scoob, you ready for some spooky shit?" I said in the voice of Shaggy. "Rhea," Ed responded as we all laughed. "Jenkins, Shaggy, are you ready for a creepy, scary time in the large, eerie buildings?" Ashton said, impersonating Velma. "Like Velma, I can't fucking wait," I responded as Shaggy. "Okay gang, let's go talk to some dead kids," Jake said as Fred while eagerly getting out the Jeep. We all got out and grabbed our gear from the back of the Jeep. We all double-checked to make sure we had everything. Ashton heard a noise coming from the fence in front of the Jeep. Ed shined his flashlight through the pitch dark. The light found its way to the owl that had landed on the top of the wooden fence in front of Building 3 about 20 feet away. Once again it was staring at us, reluctant to take its eyes off of us. The wind began to howl. The abyss of the area we were in was eerie beyond description. "It is going to be an interesting time,"